Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we have a really unique source that we're tearing into, tailored specifically for you. We're focusing on relationship anarchy, but from an angle you probably haven't considered before.
That's right. We are deep diving into an excerpt from Dr. Jaime Hoerricks' work, and it completely shifts the conversation. We're moving away from the typical discussions of, rules, scheduling, or even the differences between polyamory and non-monogamy.
Right. Our mission today is to look at relationship anarchy RA not as a structure, but as a mechanism of care. Specifically, the source argues that RA is a deliberate practice for protecting your own internal psychological coherence.
What the author beautifully terms the felt hole.
The felt hole, yeah. It's a great phrase.
It's a profound reframing. The central thesis we're exploring here suggests that the whole purpose of this approach is to resist a kind of psychological dismemberment. The goal, as the author states it, is achieving care without hierarchy for Gestalt minds.
Which basically means letting the whole remain whole. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core intrigue for me, the thing that really grabs you, is the sheer, immediate, and palpable relief, the author says, comes from one simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
The freedom of not having to define a connection.
Yeah.
Not having to put a box around it.
And that's the starting point. When you hear relationship anarchy, most people, their minds immediately jump to complex charts and rules. But this source invites us to consider the radical simplicity of what happens when you proactively remove structure.
So if we're looking for the surprising insights here, the why behind this relief, we need to start by setting the scene. What does that absence see? What does it actually look and feel like?
What's so fascinating is that the author begins by describing the RA environment almost entirely through what's not there, the experience of not being pressured. They paint this picture of spaces where nothing is asked of you.
I love that phrase, nothing is asked. It implies a complete stop to all that relational labor, Because usually when you enter a relationship, any relationship, something is implicitly asked of you. A label is asked. A future projection is asked.
Precisely. And in these non-hierarchical spaces, the source details exactly what is absent. It says there are no definitions just hovering in the air. No one is sitting there waiting for a name that will make the connection legitimate.
But the truly exhausting part that the source identifies, and this is what got me, is the internal labor that stops. The absence of the silent ranking taking place, no mental ledger being kept of where you stand in relation to anyone else.
That mental ledger.
That mental ledger keeping, yeah. That's where the cognitive bandwidth really, really drains away.
It is exhausting, and it's usually automatic. I mean, think about how that ledger shows up every day. You meet someone new, and society just hands you a set of categories. Casual friend, work friend, best friend, dating, partner, spouse.
Right.
And if they don't fit perfectly into one of those, you're forced to internally manage that discrepancy.
You're internally running a categorization algorithm every time you interact with them or talk about them or, God forbid, introduce them to someone else. It's constant maintenance.
Exactly. And the source argues that when you step into an RA space, you stop having to do that work. The connection simply exists without needing to declare itself. It just is. And that removal of the demand for clarification is what lifts the burden.
That makes so much sense from an information processing standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Hierarchy requires constant comparison. Am I higher or lower than that person in their life? Does this person get more of my time than that person?
Mm-hmm.
If you remove the hierarchy, you remove the need for that continuous comparison and maintenance.
We're taught that ambiguity is anxiety-inducing, right? But this source makes a really compelling argument that it's the enforced definition that actually causes the anxiety.
How so?
Because once you define it, you introduce a set of expectations, a rule book, if you will, that you now have to constantly perform against.
Okay, but I have to challenge that a little bit. Because society is built on escalation, isn't it? If you remove the demand for clarification, doesn't that just lead to uncertainty for others? Which then creates a new kind of anxiety, maybe for the people around you who aren't used to this framework.
That's a totally valid question. And the source does acknowledge that external pressure, but it focuses on the internal experience. For the individual practicing this, the benefit is that their connection does not need to escalate to prove it matters.
Ah, okay.
If you remove that pressure cooker of societal timelines, the expectation that dating must lead to cohabitation or a friendship has to be defined as best, you remove the pressure to perform for an external audience.
So it's not about being intentionally unclear with the world. It's about being clear internally. That the connection's value is intrinsic. It's not derived from its label or its rank.
Precisely. The cognitive burden just disappears when you understand that nothing needs to be clarified in order to be real. You stop spending all this intellectual real estate on the maintenance and ranking of the connection.
And you can dedicate that energy purely to the connection itself.
Exactly.
Wow, it makes you realize how much energy we dedicate to relational structure, often at the expense of relational substance. Okay, let's move from the cognitive relief to the truly surprising part the source emphasizes, the physical, visceral response. Dr. Hoerricks suggests the body notices immediately when this pressure is gone.
And this is where the work goes beyond just philosophy and really hooks into our nervous system. That lack of relational pressure, that feeling of not having to prepare for evaluation, it registers instantly as physical peace.
The specifics are incredibly evocative. The source notes that when you're in these undefended spaces, your shoulders stay low. The breath deepens instead of catching. I mean, think about that little physical microtension we all carry when we anticipate being categorized or judged. That subtle tightening that happens right before you introduce someone in a group, and you're mentally fumbling for the correct label.
That physical microtension is your nervous system running a low-level threat assessment. In conventional relationship spaces, the nervous system is, well, it's often preparing for inspection. It's anticipating the inevitable questions.
So what do you two?
What are you two? Or if you're talking about a big life choice, where is this going? Is this serious?
That anticipation creates a background hum, doesn't it? It means your body is actively working, even in moments that should be purely joyful or restful.
Yeah.
And the author highlights that in the absence of categorization, there is no sense of being evaluated. The hum of anticipation, that what comes next, what does this mean? It just goes silent.
And that silence is so vital. In the environment described here, the nervous system doesn't have to brace for the inspection. It simply remains. It stays in a state of rest. It removes that low-level threat that comes with the expectation of performance.
That is a powerful insight because it challenges our priorities.
Yeah.
The author stresses that this specific feeling is not excitement. It is not intensity. It is the absence of pressure. And we so often chase intensity. The thrill of a new label, the excitement of an escalation. To prove a connection matters.
Exactly. We've been conditioned to associate validation with intensity. If it's not intense, well, maybe it doesn't matter enough. But this source suggests that the most profound validation, the validation that allows for internal rest, comes from the simple, quiet absence of demand.
A connection defined by profound calm, not thrill. So when the validation comes from within, when the relationship is allowed to follow its own course without that constant need for performance, the very nature of care changes entirely.
It does. The source notes that care then moves quietly without performance. You aren't doing something because it's the expected step for a partner at level 3. You're doing it because it's a genuine act of connection.
And the timeline shifts too, doesn't it? Time passes without urgency. You're no longer operating against some societal clock that dictates moving in together by year 2 or defining the relationship by month 6.
Right.
The connection is just allowed to have its own internal rhythm.
And that freedom from the clock saves an enormous amount of energy. Urgency is inherently stressful, so when you remove urgency, you allow the connection to deepen at the pace that feels authentic to the participants, not the pace dictated by some external metric of success. This is radical rest.
The body rests, the mind is free from the labor of comparison and definition. Okay, let's take that physical piece and connect it back to that high-level concept Dr. Hoerricks introduced. Protecting coherence. The felt whole. What does this continuity actually protect?
It protects the internal reality of the connection. Think of your own experience of a relationship. It feels like a complex, three-dimensional thing, a gestalt, a whole that is so much greater than the sum of its parts. But as soon as you have to describe it to someone else, you have to break it down.
You have to translate it into a two-dimensional label. And that translation process always feels insufficient, doesn't it? It feels like you've flattened this rich, complex experience into a single restrictive word.
And that's what the source calls dissection or dismemberment. In an RA space, you no longer have to brace for the moment when something whole will be questioned or when you will be forced to, defend that coherence against dissection.
So you're not constantly preparing to preemptively translate what you feel into categories someone else might recognize. Give us a concrete example of that preemptive translation.
Sure. Think about the moment you introduce a connection to your family or a new group of friends. If you call them a friend, but you also share a mortgage and vacation together, you instantly feel that cognitive dissonance. You know the label is wrong, but it's the closest approved option.
Right.
But if you call him a partner, you've suddenly invoked this entire set of social expectations like holiday appearances or potential marriage that might not be true to the actual connection at all.
And every time we perform that translation, we slightly damage the authenticity of the relationship, even in our own minds. We're lying to the category, and in a way, we are lying to ourselves about what we really value.
That's the core of the damage. The relationship is supposed to remain inhabitable because it is not being handled. The act of handling it, defining, labeling, ranking, escalating, is what pressures the connection to conform and, well, fragments the whole.
If you leave it undisturbed, it can maintain its unique, authentic gestalt.
Exactly.
So if we synthesize this source, relationship anarchy, as Dr. Hoerricks interprets it, isn't about complexity or even radical freedom in the sense of anything goes.
No, not at all.
It's a deliberate practice of avoiding definition and hierarchy purely for the sake of internal psychological and physical rest. It's a radical act of self-care achieved through strategic omission.
It's a powerful lesson in relational rest. The ultimate benefit is that you allow the connection to simply exist in its full, authentic shape, requiring no external validation or escalation. The moment you remove the performance pressure.
You remove the majority of relational anxiety.
The anxiety caused by comparison and categorization, yeah.
That truly shifts the entire framework. Instead of asking, what does this relationship allow me to do? We should be asking, what effort does this relationship not require me to expend? That's the measure of its success.
Exactly. And it raises an important question that builds directly on the source material, one for you to consider. Think about how much of your daily mental energy is spent preemptively translating what you feel, or what a connection is, into categories that you think others might recognize or approve of. How often are you preparing for inspection?
And if you were to just remove that translation requirement right now, what specific physical toll would be lifted immediately? What part of your body would rest?
That's the key metric this essay is asking us to examine. It's not about structure. It's about the physiological cost of definition.
That is something to truly mull over. Thank you for sharing your sources with us and allowing us to take that incredibly deep dive into the protection of the felt whole. We'll see you next time.